Good morning and welcome to the July user group where you get to ask the questions. For Australian clients, it's a bit like Q&A on the ABC. So let's get started. We've got a number of questions to get through and we'll see if we can answer as many as possible. Just as a heads up, there were some questions that came in today, and much of the preparation for this was done over the weekend, but we do have those additional questions here and we'll endeavour to get to those as well as we move through today's session. So essentially today is all about trying to solve some puzzles. This honestly came about as a result of a meeting with a client a few weeks ago where they had an extensive meeting internally, had documented a range of what they perceived to be issues or challenges in relation to using Eloqua. And the thing that we noticed as we went through the list was it was clearly in many cases just a little bit of a training issue or not just really fully understanding what was going on. So hence today's user group and giving you the chance to ask the questions along the way. Alrighty, so let's meet the team. My name is Derek and I'm your host for today's webinar, as have been over the last 12 so months. And just to shout out as a thank you to two people, Addy, who is part of our support team, and Eloqua experts within the building. They certainly helped me with a number of the responses. And also to Ren from Oracle Marketing Cloud based in DC. Ren also contributed in answering some of the questions as well. So thanks guys for your help in relation to getting everything together today. For anybody that's seen an Oracle presentation, they typically start with a safe harbor statement. So I can't live in Sydney and not show you a picture of the Sydney Harbour as I do that. But essentially our safe harbor statement is so much that there are a range of questions in here which we can't possibly get to in-depth responses to all of them today. We'd be here till 4 o'clock this afternoon if we did that. And to a degree, some of the responses would really take in some of the intellectual property that Marketing Cube has amassed since 2007. You know, we've been working with Eloqua now for 12 plus years, and over that time our team have developed some pretty smart solutions to different things that are possible within the platform. So I will endeavour to answer your questions as much as possible today, but may in some cases have to direct you through to our support team or to the sales team to have a chat with them in a bit more detail as to how we can potentially assist you with some of these things. But let's get started. The audience participation part of the day. So being a marketer, I'm really keen to understand how you heard about the user group today. Email, of course, is the lion's share of how we reach people, and it appears that that is the absolute medium with which you heard about today. So look, I appreciate you taking the time to answer that. Okay, we have one from the homepage. So we've got quite a bit to get through today. There are a lot of questions that came in, which was fantastic, and that certainly makes my job a lot easier. So thank you for that. But essentially two things. We'll work through the questions, which, as I said, there are many, but what we've done is kind of group them into some logical areas for you to try and make it a bit more digestible. And then, of course, we'll walk you through the updates, which is a usual part of the user group as well. So to give you a little bit of perspective in relation to the various groups and how the different types of questions that people submitted, what we've done is sort of grouped them into almost the objects within Eloqua, and you can see that the form editor and the campaign canvas as well as the email editor was certainly the lion's share of questions that took place there. There were some more general questions that didn't really fit into a bucket, etc. Some integrations, some questions around preference centers, subscriptions, then a little bit about segments, templates, and insight as well. Let's soldier through and get some answers to these questions. And so the first one focuses on campaign canvas. Now you're actually going to be named here, people, so let's have a look. So Laura from Australia, she asks about comments on canvases for peer review and sign-off. Okay, so good news. This has been something that has been high on the list of the team at Oracle. And as of the August release, which is 18C, release 18C, Laura, you will have the ability to, I think they're calling it sticky notes, or not post-it notes, because that would be obviously trademarked by our friends at 3M. Stephen, I can see you're on the line. So sticky notes maybe, I think is what they're calling it. And so a sticky note is something that will enable you to add comments throughout the campaign canvas. Then Stephen asked the questions, why can't we add notes to the campaign canvas? That is, annotate the canvas to help others understand what has been built. Well, Stephen, we just answered your question as well. Great question, and I'm delighted to tell you we have a response. Okay, how do I direct people in a campaign canvas based on what they clicked on and not just simply that they clicked on something? That's a really good question. And what I wanted to do was actually show you something in Eloqua to try and answer that question. So the question that has been asked relates specifically to this process, which you might have used yourself considerably, which is to ask the question, has somebody clicked on an email? Now, what that's asking is, have they clicked on anything? They might have clicked on your logo. They might have clicked on unsubscribe. They might have clicked on anything. And in most cases, you're just simply looking for engagement as to how to progress people through in a particular direction. But if you want to be specific, that's where you would need to use a shared filter. And so you can see a shared filter right here. So we've recently, we're in the process of publishing an ebook around personalization. And what we're doing is looking very specifically to understand if the people in this email went through the process and actually clicked on that particular link. So we're keen to see if they opened or not, etc. But the primary thing is to understand if they clicked on the link. So if the answer is yes, those people will be routed down, and in this case, I'm going to pop them into a shared list, which is a shared list for everybody that's viewed the ebook. And then, as with any shared filter, you've got the ability, there's a positive and a negative outcome. And the configuration that we've done here is the evaluation period over 4 days, which means I think it's every hour, so 24 hours a day, every hour, Elqoua will check to see if the person has actually clicked on that link within a particular email. So the answer to the question there is to use a shared filter, and to then, once you've created your shared filter, which is done over to Tools and Shared Filters. So once you're in Tools, Contact, Tools and Shared Filters, you can then create as many filters as you want. The interface looks essentially the same as building a segment. So it's pretty much the same process. So Kath, there's an answer to your question. If you need a hand with that, just simply let me know. All right, so let's have a look at the next question. All right, so can we add a wait step to the beginning of a multi-step campaign? Yes, you certainly can add a wait step to the beginning of a multi-step campaign. So why would you want to do that? I suppose, well, let's say, for instance, you're coming in from a form. You might go from a form to a wait step and then to an email. You may want to control the delivery of that particular email as a result of the form submission. You can certainly go from a segment to a wait step, a segment traditionally being the first part of your instance or your campaign canvas. So you can go from a segment to a wait step to an email. There's no problem in doing that. But you typically can't start a campaign with a wait step. You need to generally start a campaign canvas with either a form submission, so from a form, or a segment is usually the start point. But yes, you can typically add wait steps wherever you need them. Rabia, so I hope that answers your question. And Lara asked the question, to use segments or lists so I can quickly identify if something is going wrong in my campaigns. So Lara, the problem with this question is I probably need a little bit more information to understand what the problems are that you're trying to solve. So kind of thinking out loud, and having done a little bit of thinking before today on this question, perhaps it's in relation to people not flowing through the campaign correctly. That's what you're wanting to see. So you should be able to see that directly on the campaign canvas. It's not a matter of having to go to segments per se in order to see that. You should be able to see it easily on the campaign canvas. But Lara, if you're on the call, if you wanted to use the comment function there just to throw in any additional sort of qualifying statements there, I'd be more than happy to try and get an answer there for you on those particular points. So those areas covered the campaign canvas. So there's a number of responses there to specific questions on the campaign canvas. Okay, so let's move on to the email editor. So a couple of months ago, we did an entire user group session with the new email editor, which we have some great feedback from. Thank you so much for your feedback. It's always appreciated. But before we race into answering these questions, could we just get an idea from those on the call today, who's using the new email design editor? And for those newer customers to Eloqua, this is probably the only editor you've used. So if you could just give me a little bit of an idea, that would be helpful. Okay, so it looks like most people are definitely used the new editor, with only a couple who haven't at this stage. Okay, well, it's good to see nearly 90% of people on the call today. And we've got one organization where their agency will build the emails for them. Okay, cool, thank you. Let's dive in and have a look at some of these questions. So integrating NPS score and surveys in the EDM. So Annika's from Australia, and a good question. So the NPS scenario is quite simple because it's so binary. You can ask people a very simple question with kind of a yes/no style of response, and then you just simply need to do some mathematics in the background. So there are a couple of ways you could do that. You could simply have two buttons in an email, one that says yes and one that says no. And then based on what those people click on, you could do a blind form submission in the background to rank that particular response. Now, in relation to, there are NPS websites, obviously, that you can use to do this as well, and they'll automatically take those responses and turn them into beautiful charts and all that sort of stuff for you. The challenge there is that you end up with another silo of data, necessarily. So Eloqua does have some fairly complex calculation capability where it could essentially achieve the same outcome for you, but limit that, or not limit, but keep that data within Eloqua. So again, you're avoiding silos of information. So the simple way to do it, I think, would be to have people interact directly from the email versus sending them off to a landing page where they then have to respond to the question. If you get them to respond to the question directly from within the email, that would probably give you a better response rate. It's much easier. So once they click on yes or no within the email, one of the two buttons, you could then take them to a landing page that simply thanks them for responding. It could be as simple as that. But again, Annika, if you'd like to explore that in a bit more detail as to how that could be built, please reach out to our support team, and again, more than happy to help you with that one. Next question. I would love to overlay headlines and buttons on the email banner images. Is this coming in the new editor? Well, I'm glad to tell you it's already in the new editor. So the function that you're looking for is the ability to add a background image within the editor, if I've understood the question correctly, that is. So what you're trying to do essentially, when you drag components within or into a template, wherever you place them, somewhere like here, for instance, once you do this and before you drag the image into it, you've actually got the ability to add a background image. So if I grab something from our library, okay, so the image is now sitting there in the background. So then what I can do is I can, let's have a look, grab some text, and you'll see it's black, so I'll put my heading here. I'll just be really clever and say 36, probably center it, spell it correctly, make it white. Now, there's only one caveat to this whole exercise, and for those customers who are more B2B oriented, you know exactly what the problem is already. The problem essentially is that for Outlook, that simply won't function. So for Outlook customers, they simply won't see what you put there. If you're dealing with largely a mobile audience and people in a mobile environment, then that's fine, it'll function. But the big challenge is Outlook. And so if you're dealing with a largely Outlook audience, then that function, while fantastic, is probably something that you would avoid, unfortunately. So that's just kind of keeping it real, people. But until we can get the world to move off Outlook, we're kind of stuck with some limitations when it comes to email. So I hope that answers your question, Jamie. All right, let's have a look at our next question. This one comes from Irene in Australia. Irene is clearly, if I can just say quietly, clearly coming from a MailChimp environment. And that's cool, Irene. So time warp is a function, for those of you that may or may not be familiar with MailChimp, and I don't think it's unique to MailChimp. Well, I know it's not unique to MailChimp. But when you hit send on your campaign, it over time analyzes the best time for that particular email to be sent. Now, our good friends at Responses, so within the Oracle Marketing Cloud, you may be or may not be aware, there's another product called Responses. So Responses is more of a B2C platform. Responses added a function, and I'm afraid I don't know if it's called Time Warp or not. I'd have to double check on that. But essentially what it does, instead of just looking at the group or the list performance, it actually looks at individual performance. And so, for instance, I might receive the email at 7:30 in the morning because typically that's when I open and click on my emails, versus my colleague Jason may get it at 1 o'clock this afternoon because Jason typically opens emails around 1 o'clock while perhaps he's at lunch, for instance. And so that ability is on the roadmap for Eloqua. It's already and currently available to Responses users, but is on the roadmap apparently for Eloqua as well. In relation to a time frame, the advice I was given was probably 2019, so next year sometime, but definitely on the roadmap. So that's what that function is, and it's certainly coming, so that's good news. This one I loved from Mark. Mark, I think we're all with you, and we all want to become masters of the new design editor. Look, I think the first thing you need to do is certainly go back and revisit the user group that we did. I think it was the April user group, which went into quite a bit of detail through the new editor. There's certainly a range of, or a lot of information available within the Help Center as well. So from the Help Center, you'll be able to get a lot of detail. It's just a matter of reading, and that's probably not the right answer, huh? But it's a matter of just reading and playing, and making some time from a self-development and self-improvement point of view. But have fun with it. Do some testing with it. Send emails to the team, get them to interact with it. You've probably got team members on multiple devices, mobile, desktop, etc., and just understand how those things work. Okay, so Yana asked the question there, when will the classic email editor be decommissioned? So Yana, the indication we have is, well, I think they had said originally by August. I don't know if that's still holding fast, but certainly by the end of this year. So just again, so we're crystal clear, let me just jump into the email editor so that we can be very clear on exactly what's happening. Here we are essentially looking at the email editor. So once you click on create an email, you'll all be very familiar with this process. The orangey buttons that you see, or red ones maybe, I'm slightly colorblind, so I'm not the best judge, but that's all the new design editor. That's fine. That's all staying exactly where it is. The blank HTML editor will remain and won't change. What will change is this, which is the blank design email. So if I click on that, and this is the interface that you're familiar with within Eloqua, then this is the one that will move to read only. So if this is how you've been normally building emails, probably not with images that ridiculously huge, but if that's how you've been building emails in Eloqua, then that functionality we understand is going to be retired, but still read only. So your emails will never disappear, they won't be taken away, they will still function, Eloqua will still send them and people can still engage with them and click and all that sort of thing, but you won't be able to edit them anymore. So as again, originally Eloqua had said August. I will endeavor to get some updated information for you on that one so we can be a little bit clearer. Let's jump back to the questions. So Mark, how do you become a master? You've just got to keep building and using, and I think reading as much as you can the full range of resources that Oracle have available through the Help Center, certainly through Topliners. You'll probably find a lot of discussion in Topliners, which would be helpful, and also the new Launchpad site, which we'll talk about a little bit later today as well. Okay, so Caitlin, swap code to WYSIWYG. Okay, so depending on how old you are, not you, Caitlin, specifically, the people on the call, WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get. Now, the new design editor at this stage does not enable you to look at the HTML. For instance, you can't right-click and view HTML, etc. But what you can do is drop an HTML element within the email itself. So let me just get the editor open here again and show you how that's done. So once we access the new editor and have our email sitting in front of us, essentially what we're looking for is the content over here on the left-hand side. So I have access to template here on the screen. So again, hopefully you can see my screen with Eloqua in front of you. And essentially what you want is this piece right here, which is the custom code area. So with custom code, you can bring that in, and then you can start to perform your magic in relation to anything that you may need to do with HTML that's a little bit outside of the box that you're wanting to work on. So at the moment, that's the extent of the functionality you have available to you from an HTML point of view within the new editor. But keeping in mind, excuse me, with the old editor, I'll have to come up with a better term than old editor, I suppose. But let me see if I can. Yeah, I'm trying to find one. Let's just go into a generic one. But this environment, so this editor, which is with all the HTML on the right-hand side and your email on the left-hand side, then this is not going anywhere. This is not being retired. This is not being taken away. This area of Eloqua will continue to function as it always has. So hopefully, Caitlin, that answers your question. Let's move on to the form editor. So the form editor is probably one of my favorite areas of Eloqua. I mean, it's probably one of the more boring parts of Eloqua because it's not pretty and there are no pretty colors and pictures, but a form can do amazing things. And once we really understand the power of forms, this is really where you start to explore a lot of the functionality and the automation specifically that comes with Eloqua. But to help me get a little bit of a pulse check on your understanding of forms and how maybe you're using them today, could you just give me a little bit of a tip on how you're creating your forms today? Okay, what I'd love to ask then as a subset of a question would be for those people that save as old forms, do you find you have a lot of problems with forms? Saving as old forms is just, I think, fraught with danger because they're so highly configurable. It's just very simple, very easy to make mistakes and not update the form correctly. In many cases, if you're doing things from a repetitive point of view, so offering people the ability to download a white paper, register for an event, those sorts of things, a template is a much smarter solution and one that probably would save you time. Typically, I find people may think they're saving time by saving as an old form, but quite often that's not the case because then they have issues and complications and error messages with old forms. So I give that to you as a little bit of feedback. Something for you to think about. If you're doing something on a repetitive basis and you require the ability to do something again and again, create it once and save it as a template so that it's clean each time and the individual specifics of a particular campaign are not wrapped up in your particular form that you keep saving as you go through. But I'll leave it with you to make that decision. Alrighty, so this question from Helen and Pasaban in India. So from Australia and India, thanks guys for the question. The absolute and resounding answer to this question is yes, absolutely. This is kind of Eloqua 101. Typically when we implement Eloqua for new clients, this is one of the very first things we do. So it's usually the contact us form on the website. Today sits in their CMS, whether it's WordPress or Sitecore or whatever it might be. And the challenge is that typically generates an email that goes to an inbox and no one ever checks that inbox, etc. So one of the very first things we do is turn that contact us form into an Eloqua form. So just to be clear, the way that works is we leave the website exactly as it is. We don't change the front-end customer experience, the look and feel of that form. We simply replicate that form over in Eloqua. Eloqua generates HTML code, as it does with every single form. We take that HTML code, we then put it behind the Sitecore website or WordPress, whichever it is. And now when people submit that form, which is not an Eloqua form, it's the WordPress or the Sitecore form, but because it has the Eloqua HTML sitting behind it, the form HTML specifically, that information that is submitted in the form now comes directly into Eloqua. And of course, once it's in Eloqua and it's a form submission, well, then you can do just about anything, right? We can push it through to the CRM as a lead. We can check to see if it's to contact, we can update the contact in the CRM. If you want somebody to be advised, we can trigger a notification email from the back-end developer. If you want to send the person who submitted the form a thank you email, saying thank you, we've received your information, we'll be in contact with you shortly, then you can use Elqoua to deliver that experience for you. So, yes, can Eloqua forms be integrated into non-Eloqua landing pages? It's a resounding yes. Okay, so a couple of caveats there for you. If you're wanting the form to pre-populate on your site core or WordPress or whichever CMS your website is, that's not necessarily available, and also progressive profiling. But typically things like the Contact Us form may not have progressive profiling, up to you, I suppose. But things are changing very soon in relation to landing pages, and I'll have a little bit more information for you towards the end of this particular session. Okay, so next question. This one comes from Mark in Australia. So Mark asked the question in relation to lots of different pieces of downloadable content, and can we simplify that by having a single form to access the content? And Mark, the answer to your question is an absolute yes, you can do that. Now, how you do it requires some expertise that is a little above my pay grade. All right, let's rock it on. So Mark, yes, the answer to your question is a resounding yes, you can. Makes perfect sense. You don't want to have to create hundreds of forms to access your amazing reports and information that you're offering your customers. Now, as I said, it's a little bit above my pay grade as to how it's done, because it does require a little bit of HTML expertise and some skill to configure that for you, but we certainly have a couple of clients that I can think of. One particular client in the real estate world who uses a single form across many different websites. Each website represents a real estate property, a physical property of some sort, but it's a single Eloqua form that sits across those many different websites. But that form is smart enough to know which website the person is on when they submitted it, etc. It brings that information in and then routes that through to the CRM to generate leads, and those leads relate to a specific physical property that the person was inquiring about. So your example is no different. It's just you're not doing properties, you're doing downloadable content, exactly the same. So Mark, my suggestion to you would be to certainly reach out to the Marketing Cube support team. Jason can probably assist you with that. We would just need to sort of scope out and understand exactly what it is you're wanting to achieve and how flexible it needs to be. You know, what happens when you add new content, for instance? What happens if you retire old content? You need to think those things through, and we can certainly help from there. But yes, yeah, if you're creating hundreds of forms for the same thing, there's no future in that. we certainly have a better solution for you, so not a problem. Okay, next question comes from South Korea. So I have a question about processing steps in the case of form creation. After designing the form and the processing steps are fixed, is there a way of releasing that status and changing the order? Look, guys, the key thing to understand here is with all of your assets, forms, landing pages, emails, once the campaign is active and you see active in the top left-hand corner of the screen against your form, for instance, you can make changes. That's not a problem. So if there's a form processing step in this example that potentially is now redundant in the course of the campaign and you don't want it to happen anymore, you actually have the ability within the form itself to make some changes. Let me quickly jump in to a form here and I'll show you exactly what we mean. If you've done this before, you've made some changes. If the asset is active, Eloqua will always pop up and give you a little message basically saying, are you sure you want to make these changes? Because this particular asset is in fact active. Okay, so we'll go to processing steps. This is actually the registration form you completed to join us for today's session. So you can see all our various areas here in the back. So you'll notice, let's have a look at add to campaign. Okay, so in this case, this makes perfect sense actually because the user group is underway now. So if somebody tries to register, that's not going to work. So at the moment, if somebody registers, the campaign will still send them an email. However, if I click on Never here on the right-hand side and then hit Save, that's the message that you get. So it's saying this is active, are you really sure you want to do this? Derek, don't make a mistake. That's fine. I'm happy with that. So I say save, and that's fine. It now means that if anyone submits the form, that they won't be sent to the campaign and they won't receive a confirmation email. So that can be one example of what you mean. Hopefully that answers your question. There are changes coming to forms as well, but we probably won't see those changes probably till next year, I think at this stage, like early next year potentially. But yeah, there's more changes coming, which will be quite cool. So we'll keep you updated as soon as we learn more about those. Question from New Zealand, from Yulia. What's the best way to add terms and conditions link or text to an Eloqua form, ideally like a drop-down before a submit button? So, Yulia, you might have noticed actually as you've registered for some of our events, even the user group, you would have seen a slightly different experience. So again, I'm just trying to find an example to show you. Now, this definitely requires a little bit of configuration. There are multiple ways you can present this information, right? So it would depend on the solution that you want and how you want to configure it. So what we've elected to do is to include information which is kind of like the terms and conditions to a degree on our landing pages. Okay, so here, so what we've done, so this copy that you see here, along with the button is a normal function from within Eloqua. That's not unusual. You probably all added tick boxes or check boxes to forms previously. But in order to get this copy to sit here under the landing page, well, once it's on the landing page, requires a little bit of HTML. But once it's done, it's done. And this is a really good example of why you would use templates for forms, because you don't want to have to remember to do it every time. So by creating a template, once you determine what the copy is that you want to have sitting underneath your opt-in checkbox, for instance, then we can simply configure that for you, build it into both the form template and your landing page templates so that it simply appears every single time. So easy enough to achieve. You just need to determine how you'd like to do it. I think, Yulia, you used the expression a drop-down, for instance. So I assume by that you would probably want to have sort of a yes, I opt in, or no, I don't, for instance. That was a little bit problematic, because then what do you do with the no people versus a checkbox is it's either on or it's not. And so some of you might have noticed with our website now, if you don't select that box, you'll reach a page that basically says, hey, I'm really sorry, but unless you opt in, we can't really talk to you. There are different ways. You just need to think through the experience that you want to deliver, and then we can assist you with working out the best solution for your requirements. So, Yulia, I hope that answers your question. So, yeah, just have a chat with Marika, Yulia. We can help you with that. Just as, again, think through that experience that you want to deliver, and we can certainly make that happen for you. All right, there were some general questions that didn't really kind of fit into any particular bucket. So let's have a look at a couple of those. This is a great example. I'd like to be better at it. And I think that means Eloqua as a whole. And so from our friends over there in the Philippines, absolutely. And look, there are loads of ways that you can be better at it. Using the platform again and again is probably the best way. You're here on the user group, so that's awesome. Thank you for joining us. That's hopefully helping you become better. The Help Center, I can't understate the importance of the Help Center. I think it's a great location to really understand more about the platform, and would encourage you to look at it more regularly as you have questions about what the platform actually does. QR code generation. So Rob in Australia asked the question in relation to QR code generation. Now at this stage, we're not aware of any app that you can add to Eloqua that would necessarily generate QR codes for you. We do have a client though that what they've done is they've created or generated QR codes that are unique to particular, in their case, students. And so every student within the system has a unique QR code. So in various communications, what we then do is they're all stored against a URL, I think it is. That information is matched to an email address. That then means we're able to send out emails, for instance, that would associate a unique QR code which relates to that email address which in turn relates to a human, in this case a student, which is used for event check-in, etc. Now, keeping in mind in that example, though, that QR code relates to an individual, not to a specific campaign. So the QR code is pretty much created when the student joins the school or becomes a student at the school, and that QR code stays with them for the life of their time at the school and is used in many, many different things. That was, I'm afraid, Rob, the best we could do from a QR code generation. If anyone knows of any other solution, we'd certainly love to hear about that, though. Integration. Integration is good fun. So data integration with Adobe Analytics from RAM in India. So there are a number of areas within Elqoua where you can certainly add third-party information. Third-party tools. So Google Analytics is a great example. So just as you would add Google Analytics to Eloqua, you can do the same thing with Adobe Analytics as well. So if you're using Adobe Analytics, you can certainly add that. It's actually out of the box. Just have a chat with your administrator, or any member of the Eloqua support team at Marketing Cube. But that would be something that you would typically do the first time. So once you set up Eloqua, you've just purchased Eloqua, you would add that and then you would leave it. It's much the same as Google Analytics. So there are a range of ways that you can manage that, and out of the box is always the easiest. Emmeline, how do we link information between Eloqua with Salesforce? I love this question. So if we set aside Salesforce for a moment and really just say CRM, so whether it's Salesforce, Oracle Sales Cloud, NetSuite, Siebel, any of the big sort of CRM platforms. For most of those platforms, there's out-of-the-box integration available between Elqoua and those CRM platforms. For others, it would be integration that would be required to be built. But for you as a user using Elqoua, how do you link information through to your instance of Salesforce? It would typically be via a form and a form processing step, which would create or would access a program within Elqoua. So a program is a function within Elqoua, either the program or the program canvas, which enables you to communicate with systems beyond Elqoua, and in this case, Salesforce. So programs are quite powerful and they can do loads of different things. And one thing that a program does is talk to your CRM platform. But in the very back end of Elqoua, again, this is typically something that is done in the initial setup of your platform. There would be discussions in place about, well, we've got all this data sitting in the CRM. Which of that data really should flow through to Elqoua? Is it account information? Is it probably contacts and leads? Do we want opportunity information? Do we want case information coming through to Elqoua as well? And the answer can be yes to all of those things, by the way. It's not a binary exercise. So there's a range of ways you can do it. But I imagine, Emmeline, what you're really looking for is an automated process of getting information from Elqoua to Salesforce. And that's simple. It's out of the box. And for most customers, that would have been created when your instance was set up. So if you have a more specific question in relation to that connection and how those two things work, please reach out to us directly. Jason's on the line there. He can probably answer some of those questions for you, or happy to chat in more detail should you need to. Then subscription and preference management information. So subscription and preference management is a huge part of Elqoua, and for anyone in the room that was perhaps in the buying decision phase of purchasing Elqoua, it's probable this was one of the key things that would have come up in that discussion. So Josh asked the question, how can I track unsubscribe for EDMs if using a landing page preference center? So the if is not really critical here, Josh. The ability to track unsubscribes is something that you can achieve. Probably one of the easiest ways to do it would be to go to segments. So within segments, you've got the ability to ask the question of who has globally unsubscribed within a certain time frame, for instance. You could add additional filters into that segment to say people who were in this campaign, for instance, or if you wanted to get right down to an individual EDM, then you could ask the question there. But keeping in mind, with your preference center that's sitting on a landing page, it's a form, essentially. And so maybe just simply looking at the form submission data would be the cleanest way to do it. If you wanted to, what you could potentially also do is set yourself up a daily or weekly report, for instance, to come through from Insight, which will give you form submission information over a certain period. for instance, and it'll show you the values within that form as to who's unsubscribed. And it would also depend, are we talking global unsubscribes or are we talking unsubscribes from the email group level as well? So a couple of things to factor in there. But Josh, if you want to reach out to me directly, that's fine too. If you just want to give me a little bit more information as to what the problem is that you're trying to solve, and then we can be a little bit more specific there for you in that response. And Andrew, how do we create different preference centers for different countries from the same Eloqua instance? Well, I'm glad you asked. That's an easy response, actually. That one's not too hard at all. There just becomes questions, really, in relation more from a business process probably than anything else, because if each different region has terms and conditions and requirements in relation to specifics around privacy and those things, you may want to treat people a little bit differently. But the preference center and your email groups will be tied very closely together. So let's say you've got 3 or 4 different geographies or countries that you wanted to cover. Let's say we've got 4 countries. So essentially you would have 4 landing pages, one for New Zealand, one for Australia, one for Singapore, one for the Philippines. You've really got to think then through the email groups. So what is it you're offering people? If you're offering event information or an event subscription, do you want to offer that to everybody in those 4 locations, or will it differ across those different locations? So we just need to sort of do a little bit of scoping to understand the experience that you would need to deliver across those countries, look for the common experiences, etc., and then work out, well, what do we do? Do we create email groups for each country? You need to kind of think that through. But the answer is yes. We have many enterprise clients using Eloqua who exactly do this. They have different preference centers for different countries, often based on legal requirements, etc., having to deliver different experiences. So not a problem, Andrew. Simple enough to do. Just requires some thinking up front to make sure we deliver the right experience. Next one is Insight and Analytics. So very new to Eloqua, I'd like to know more about the capabilities of email reporting. Emily, what are the easiest ways that you can filter into understanding the reports that are available from Analytics, specifically in relation to emails? Once you're at the Eloqua email home screen, which is what hopefully you can see in your screen right now, you'll notice here on the top right-hand corner, there's the big button, Reports and Dashboards. So once you click on Reports and Dashboards, it'll take you into Insight, but it'll take you directly to the area of Insight that covers all of your email reporting. It's kind of like a shortcut, I suppose, that takes you straight to where you kind of need to be. And so once you're in here, you're then able to see all of the various reports that are available. Now, some of the more common reports that people are looking for is, an overview of email performance, and there's actually an overview report. You can see that one there if I just zoom in a little bit. So the email analysis overview report. The other more common one that we find people asking questions about is the email click-through link breakdown. So in any given email, you may have 5 or 6 or 7 or more hyperlinks leading off to different things. And some of those will include, unsubscribe, etc., and maybe just a logo to your homepage, but it's the campaign things you're really looking for in more detail. So the email click-through overview report is a great example for that one. That'll give you the detail you need to understand. The other thing to think about, though, too, from an email point of view, and this would now drill down to looking at a single email, but something that I think people may have missed with the change to the new editor is the click-through report. So the click-through report, which is a visual tool, so it shows you the email and shows you where people are clicking, used to be up here in the menus, but it's now changed and it is over here under reporting, and it's the click-through report. So the visual click-through report shows you where people are actually clicking on the email. So this is the email invitation you received for the user group, and you can see nobody clicked on the banner. That's interesting. Here I can see those 71%. So 55 clicks. People have gone through this register now button. Other people have scrolled down, and then there's been a few that have come down and they've clicked at the bottom. So that's nice and simple. It also covers off down the bottom here for you all of your social, etc. links. and anyone that might click through to the website, you see there, it shows you the actual URL in question, so you've got all that information there. So that's looking at a single email, but if you're looking at multiple emails, then Insight is probably the better direction to head. So Emily, I hope that answers your question for you. The other question came from Casey Ann. Can we please revisit some of the new features of the new Insight and using dashboards to our advantage? Casey Ann, absolutely. Today's user group won't be an opportunity to do that. There's probably a whole other user group in and of itself. We are developing a series of 3 webinars which will walk people through the new Insight. That'll be run separately to the user group and is something that we'll push out to customers across the region, hopefully within the next month or so. But yes, we can certainly do that. If you'd like to do something one-on-one, Casey Ann, or with the team, more than happy to come in and make some time to do that, and maybe I can test run the webinar format on your team. That could be helpful for everybody. Segments, questions on segments. So Simon from the Netherlands wanted to understand splitting an upload list into separate segments. So I think what Simon is asking here is I've got an Excel spreadsheet of, say, 10,000 contacts. I want to upload those into Eloqua, but in that single process of uploading them, can I split them into multiple segments? I don't believe that's possible. I did ask around and we couldn't sort of figure out a solution to do that. But the solution would be possibly, Simon, that if there are values contained in the data that you're uploading that already separates those groups, whether it's their country, whether it's the fact that they're a customer or a prospect, or maybe it's their lead source, whatever the data is, you can certainly do that in one upload into Eloqua, and then use the segment filter criteria in order to split those out into different lists or different segments within the platform. Templates. So using templates that are effective and on brand, more so than needing to change and use code. Susie from Australia, great question, and this is something that I cannot emphasize enough, and certainly in most of my training sessions with customers and meetings with customers, it's about templates, templates, templates. And there's nothing stopping you, anything, whether it's an email, a campaign canvas, segments, landing pages, forms, all of those assets within Eloqua can be created as templates. For instance, our user group, so everything is templated in the user group, otherwise that could just drive me crazy. So the email invitation you get, the confirmation email that you get, the reminder emails that you get, for instance, these are all templates. Nothing is saved as from last month. So the campaign canvas is a template, the form is a template, the landing pages are all templates. And so what that means is that hopefully I'll never mess up and provide you with links to last month's webinar because I've cheated and done a save as, for instance. So templates and the use of templates is critical. It's not just simply saving as and storing them within Eloqua as an asset. It's about literally saving them as a template. And once they're saved as a template, you can then manage them and update them accordingly, and then everybody has access to the newest and the best version of that particular template. So I can't emphasize that one enough, Susie. All right. So one final question, and then we'll get straight into the updates. If anybody is looking for specific training on anything that we've kind of talked about today, we can have Jason reach out to you, and we can look at different ways we can do it, whether it's via webinar, whether it's face-to-face. We can accommodate whatever kind of works for your team. So please go ahead and let us know, and we'd be more than happy to have Jason reach out and contact you. All right, quickly, we're just on 12 o'clock, so we need to race through these last ones. What's coming, what's new? 18C is the next release of Eloqua, coming in August. I'll give you the dates for that in just a moment. Probably the most exciting news is the landing page design editor will be available in what we call controlled availability. If you'd like to participate in that particular program, you will need to log a service request with Oracle. I believe the controlled availability is still open. They do tend to close it off after a certain point. So if your organization is interested, essentially, guys, what that gives you is the ability to create landing pages in the same way that you're now creating emails with the new email editor. Sticky notes was the other things that we talked about. So there you go, it is sticky notes. So Stephen, you'll be happy to know that we're not ripping post-it notes off there, so it's a sticky note, but I bet it's going to be yellow. And you can add those to both the campaign canvas and also the program canvas, so that's good news. For those clients running standard or enterprise editions of Eloqua, the new audit log function, this is probably one of those yawn functions, like yeah. But it's actually incredibly helpful. So it's when you're in Eloqua, you're looking at the top line menu, there's a little home icon. The home icon will include a function called audit log. And what it does, it just gives you the ability, and it's the administrators who will probably get most excited about this, it gives you the ability to understand who's doing what within the platform, who's uploading, who's downloading, changes that have been made across individual asset types within time ranges, and also of specific actions. Did they delete whatever it was, etc. So the audit log is available for standard and enterprise and will be generally available in August. For those customers on the basic instance of Eloqua, it is an add-on at this stage, I believe. I'm afraid I don't have any pricing information, but if you're interested, we can certainly show you that. So website performance dashboard is coming, so you'll be able to see that in August. Then there are some segmentation enhancements coming, and I need to explore this, guys, in more detail to understand exactly what it's going to deliver, but they talk about the easily reordering of segment elements. When is it all happening? That's the next question. So these are the publish times on topliners to help our region a little bit more. I've turned those all into Australian East Coast Standard Time for you, so for our friends in New Zealand and Manila, etc., and Korea, Singapore, etc. Hopefully you can sort of get a gauge from here. Many clients within Australia are on Pod 7, so you can see that sort of Friday night through Saturday morning, but all happening around the 17th and 18th of August. So when you get to work on the 20th, Monday the 20th of August, you'll see a lot of these enhancements and changes in place. So if there's any other questions you've got, please let us know. Happy to answer those. But otherwise, what we'll do, I think, moving forward is we might include this option for you to ask questions as you register for the user group. So if you like that, then I think we'll probably continue with that over the coming months. And with all these questions, there was certainly plenty of content for more user groups, so topics. So we'll hold on to those and we'll work through those over the remainder of the year for you as well. But happy to stay here on the line. If you do have some questions, please use the chat function to ask those questions, and happy to walk through those with you in a bit more detail. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you making the time, and thanks again for contributing and putting your questions in. Hopefully we can help you with some of those over the coming weeks and months. Thanks everybody, and have a great week.